I have some portion or some topics that I'm going to present, which is the purpose statement, objective, research questions, and hypothesis. So we know every research, you must have a defined purpose. You must have a defined objectives or research questions. So, and the central goal of the purpose of your research. What I mean here is, what is the central goal of the or purpose of the research? What do you want to achieve? What do you want to get? You ask yourself, for example, I have a problem here. So how can I achieve the solution of this problem? What is the research topic? For example, a questions, what is the research questions? Then what are the problems? Did your topic intend to address in any, and why do you want to intend the, and why do you want make the research, for example? So many projects or thesis get into difficulty whenever you did not set the goal of targeting or achieving the goals. You may end up getting error, collecting errors, collecting data that are lots of error in it. So for this, stating your aim for the research is very, very important in research. Your objectives and research questions and hypotheses. What is this purpose of the study? We are going to see the purpose or aim of the study. In my slides here, I said it refers to the main goal or brief overarching aim of the research project, typically placed before the specific research objectives or questions. Whenever you come for research, you must state, as I said, you must state your purpose of study. And this purpose of study, it's brief statement that encompass a lot of idea that you want to achieve. And before the objectives or research questions, the aim or purpose of study must be stated. And this aim or purpose of study should be broad and introductory rather than focused and specific. What I mean by focused, you have to focus on the topic that you design for the research. This will give you room to state the clear aim that you want to achieve for the research. When writing the aim or purpose of the study, there are some expected terms that a researcher will use so that it can easily identify which aim, it can easily identify the aim of the research. There are some basic terms or important terms that when a researcher come and use them, they will help somebody who is trying to get what he is trying to say to understand which data is the researcher will use, or it will clear state the aim of the research by defining the word. So this term are to be linked to the type of the research needed to be conducted. So these key terms that identify the aims or purpose are, we have like 3 types of research. We have survey research, case study, developmental studies, and what have you. In this case, whenever your research is survey or case study, research studies, or developmental studies, you can use the words like explore, describe, determine, ascertain, verify, identify. So this, whenever you use this, so it can easily identify the purpose of your research. When you comes to correlational studies, like relationship, to show the relationship between this and this, to explain these, to predict that, to relate these two, another maybe variable. If it is experimental, like quasi-experimental research, you can use the words like cause, effect, causality, like to show the significant difference between this and that. So here, I can give an example of of the main aim of the research or purpose. For example, you can say the main aim or purpose of this study is to investigate students' knowledge, attitude, and perception about environmental education in Nigerian's tertiary institutions. Here are a few words or brief statement, but clearly shows where you want to go. That is the aim or purpose of the study. For example, the topic is the students' knowledge and perceptions about environmental education in Nigeria. That is the topic, for example. So now, what is your main aim? What is your target? My aim of the research is the main aim or purpose of the study is to investigate students' knowledge, attitude, and perception about environmental education in Nigeria. Now, I'm going to explain what is research objective. It is a critical component of a successful research engagement. It's a set of clearly defined and meaningful objectives. So it is very important component in a research. That is, in a successful research, you must be engaged by meaningful objective. You have to write your objectives clearly. Critical, that is why I said it is a critical component of a successful research engagement. And you have to set clearly and defined and meaningful objectives. These research objectives are precise statements of what the research projects will attempt to achieve. And when writing research objectives, there is need for identifying the variables being investigated. What is variable here? Whenever we say variable in research, simply refer to a person, thing, place, or phenomena that you are trying to measure in some way. That is the variable. So in research, you must use variables. That variables can be a place. That variable can be a person or group of persons, and that variable can be something happen like a phenomena. So whenever trying to write objectives, there is need for identifying the variables that you want to investigate. You must bring out the variables. One, the variables must be given operational names. I will give an example here. Instead of you, when writing objectives, instead of you to state to write characteristics of students, it is better to bring out or identify the specific characteristics, such as age, gender, grade level, socioeconomic status, etc., etc. Two, indicate what data to be collected. Writing objectives help in finding out what type of data are to be used. For example, correlational studies. Maybe you will say to compare, to show the relationship of this and that. Whenever you see that, you know it is what? correlational studies, and you know the type of data that you're supposed to collect, and also the data analysis that you're supposed to use for the statistical analysis that you're supposed to use for the research. For example, gender is this gender, grade level, or age. We know they are all what? Demographical data. You know what type, the type of data that you use, and also the type of analysis you use. 3, relationship are to be investigated. Specific objectives indicates clear what variables are being related to other variables. So for research objectives, we have 6 important guidelines that should be observed when developing research objectives. Whenever you follow these 6 steps, they will guide you in developing your own research objectives. They should be presented briefly and concise. That is number 1. Whenever you are writing your objective, they have to be brief. What I mean by brief is short and concisely, and they should contain important informations. 2, they should be presented in logical sequence. That is, from this objective, move to next objectives, and go to number 3 objectives. And each objective has a link with one another. For example, number 1 objectives should have a link with the number 2 objectives. It means that when objective 1 is not answered, so also the number 2 objective will not be explained. 3, they should be realistic. For example, when you are developing your objectives, you must know that you have time frame. For example, a level 300 student or grade 3 in university. You know, undergraduate students normally, or most of the time, it is 4-year program, 3-year program, 5-year program. And maybe toward the end of your program, you'll present your project. It means that you have time limit. So you must be within that time limit. You have to be realistic. So don't bring too much objectives that you cannot meet the time, or don't bring something that you cannot easily finish in time. And within the available resources, do I have the resources that I can meet or my target, for example, of achieving the objectives? Maybe financial resources, or where you will go and get the data. For example, if the data cannot be collected in a time, it is better for you to change the objective or to change the topic you want to present. They should be phrased in operational terms, as I explained earlier, such as instead of characteristics of students, you can say the age, you can set the age, find the age, maybe the gender, and what have you. They should use action verbs that are specific enough to be evaluated or measured. For example, to assess, to determine, to compare, to verify, to describe. They should be static once the study work begins. The objective should not be moving. You can, for example, you have number 1 objectives. So whenever you start work on number 1 objectives, you have to finish it before you move to next objectives, because maybe when you answered number 1 objectives, it will give you guides to go for the second objectives. So here I have some terms or keywords that you use for the objectives. You can use one. The general objectives of this study is to examine, or the main purpose of the study is to examine. More specific, you have more objectives. For example, more specific objectives, this study tends to identify, to determine, to verify, to defect, to investigate, to compare, to measure, to drive, and other, etc., etc. This is the example of research aim or purpose and objectives I presented. Here I said the purpose of the study is to investigate students' knowledge, attitude, and perception about environmental education in Nigerian tertiary institutions. Research objectives addressing the purpose of the study were as follows. 1, to evaluate the student attitudes toward environmental education in tertiary institutions in Nigeria. 2, to identify students' perception about environmental education in Nigeria. 3, to assess the level of students' knowledge about environmental education of tertiary. And many more, you can bring as many objectives as possible. But it is ideally the objectives, for example, for undergraduate, supposed to be at least 2. And for postgraduate, like masters and PhD, like masters can be 3. And for PhD can be up to 4. But you have to stick to the rules of the objectives. Don't go beyond the time, your time limit. So now, what is a research question? After stating research purpose, you should narrow the focus of your study through specific questions to be answered. You stated your purpose of the study. So now, you have to narrow the focus of your study by some kinds of questions that you may ask. And this type of questions that you may ask are not just come up to your mind and ask question. No, you have to critically look at the topic. You have to critically study your purpose. How can you study the purpose or the topic? You have to go through literature, past literature. That is, you have to read extensively to find out the, to bring out the more information about the topic that you want study. There are lot of previous studies. So you have to read very well. Then from there, you bring out your research questions. For an investigator conducting a study, research questions are the key preliminary step in research process. So they are very, very important, and they guide you to achieve your aim. Research questions can be, these are now defined what is research questions. Said research questions can be defined as questions in quantitative or qualitative research that narrow the purpose statement to specific questions that researchers seeks to answer. Since from the definition, we said research questions in quantitative or qualitative research. So now we are going to see the qualitative research questions. In qualitative research questions, researcher develop research questions, not objectives. Here, the researcher will develop the research questions, but not objectives. That is specific goals for the research. Your specific goals for the research. You now ask questions on the specific goals of the research. These research questions adopt 2 forms. We have a central question and we have associated sub-questions. For example, how do early adolescent female read literature that falls outside the realm of fictions? This can be the central question. And the subsequent questions or sub-questions can be: 1, how do women in psychology doctoral program describe their decision to return to school? It's research, is the research question that you intend to answer. Then B, how do women in psychology doctoral program describe school change, these women's lives? This is the type of qualitative research question. And the quantitative research questions in study use research question and hypothesis to shape specifically focus the purpose of the study and specifically focus the purpose of the study. Include your variable in your questions and hypothesis in three basic manner. When writing research questions, or mostly in quantitative research question, we normally use hypothesis. But you have to be guided by this. One, describing responses to independent, mediating, or dependent variables. You have to describe what is the response of the independent variable, or what is the response of mediating variables, or the response of dependent variables. You have to describe this when writing your research, when you are writing your questions, if it is quantitative research. B, comparing groups of an independent variable to see its impact on dependent variables. You now compare the groups of independent variables, then you observe its impact on dependent variable. Then C, relating one or more independent variables to a dependent variable. You now relate one or more independent variables to a dependent variable. That is correlational studies. Example here I will give is, how do students rate on critical thinking skills? A descriptive question focused on independent variable. Here we have our dependent variables and independent variable. So the focus of descriptive question goes to independent variables here. Because how do the students rate on critical thinking skills? Then two, what are the students' achievement levels or grades in science classes? A descriptive questions for the descriptive dependent variable. Now we'll see hypothesis. A hypothesis is a statement that can be tested by scientific research. A suggested solution to a problem, and it can be an intellectual guess. What is guess or intellectual guess? It means that you have to use your brain and guess something. And it's a suggested, it is a, for example, you ask yourself, that is the questions you ask yourself, then you just give yourself an answer critically. So that is hypothesis. But that answer you gave yourself, it is not been tested. It is you you are going to test it. That is why we said it is a statement that can be tested by scientific research. You cannot just form a question and give answer without test and say that you stated your hypothesis. Whenever you do that, it is wrong. A researcher develops hypothesis when he wants to observe the relationship between two or more variables. So whenever you want to develop hypothesis, it means that you want to observe the relationship between this variable and this variable, between dependent variable and independent variable, for example. It is a tentative answer to your research questions that has not yet been tested, as I stated earlier. It's a hypothesis, as said, an intellectual guess. So it is just not a guess like this. It should be what? Based on existing theories and the knowledge. You must read existing theories. Existing theories and past knowledge. That is literature search, literature review. Existing theories, then later you guess your answer. Then from there, you test your answer, whether it is true or not. So we can see what are the variables in hypothesis. Hypothesis propose a relationship between two or more variables. So an independent variable is something the researcher change or control, while dependent variable is something that the researcher observe and measure. For example, if you want to know what is the independent variable, or what is the cause of the variable, what is the assumed effect, what is the effect of the study, you can see this example. Consumption of apple daily reduce attending to a doctor frequently. We said here, consumption of apple is independent variable, and it is assumed cause. It is you that you consume the apple. After you consume the apple, then you noticed that it adds some health. It gives me more health than before. Whenever I eat an apple, for example, an apple a day or 2 apples, then before I used to go to see doctor every day. So I'm now taking apple day by day. So what I used to go, going to the doctor every day now reduce, because maybe I start feeling some the status of my health now change. So it means that the independent variable, or the cause, that is the cause, consumption of apple is the cause, while attending the doctor is assumed effect. So when you want to develop your hypothesis, we have some steps that you can easily follow and achieve your goal. 1, ask some questions. Ask some questions. You have to begin your research with questions. That is what we call research questions, as I stated earlier. Then you have to be specific. You have to be focused. And that questions you ask is researchable questions. Is the question you set researchable question? Now I will give an example. Do students who attend more lectures get better exam results? Do students who attend more lectures get better exams results? It's a question, it's a research questions, and these questions is researchable questions. From there, you can now test whether the students get better results whenever they attend more lectures. By what? Maybe by testing, by giving them an exams, by giving them a test, maybe unnoticed test. So those that are not attending will not get the test. So this research, this example is researchable, for example. That's why we say it should be specific, focused, and researchable. 2, do some preliminary research. Preliminary research, you have to look at the trials as explained earlier, or previous studies, that is past literature review. You have to read very, very well. Construct a conceptual framework. This conceptual framework will help you to identify your variables of study, of what you think the relationship are between them. Then 3, formulate your hypothesis. In formulating the hypothesis, now you should have an idea of what you expect to find. Write your initial answer to the question in a clear, concise sentence. This clear and concise sentence, the sentence should be very well clear and contain information, correct information of what you want to find. E.g., attending more lectures lead to better exams results. You now form your hypothesis. Attending more lectures leads to better exams results. You have your variables. Attending more lectures leads to better exams results. The cause is attending more lectures. Then the effects is exams results. 4, refine your hypothesis. You need to make sure your hypothesis is specific and testable. What is meant by this testable? You have to make sure that when you form or when you set the hypothesis, it should be testable. You can test it scientifically. The hypothesis should, now the hypothesis also should contain the relevant variables, the specific group being studied. For example, the group of people, or the group of the level 100 students, the grade 2 students, the university students, the lecturers, for example, they are all senior lecturers, professors. They are the group of this group that can be studied on. Then the predicted outcome of the experiment or analysis. You have to predict the expected result. 5, phrase your hypothesis in 3 ways. You can now phrase your hypothesis in 3 ways. The first way is to identify the variables. You can write a simple prediction in if-then form. If-then form. For example, here, if a first-year student start attending more lectures, then their exam score will improve. So now you what? Predict your hypothesis in if-then form. If a first-year student start attending more lectures, then their exam score will improve. Then number 2, in academic research, which is more scientifically, hypotheses are more commonly phrased in terms of correlation or effects. Most of the hypotheses in academic research are more commonly phrased in terms of correlation, to correlate or to show the effects, to correlate between 2 variables or to show the effects of 2 variables, which when this causes the variable, this variable causes this, and the effect of this and the effect is this variable, where you directly stated the predicted relationship between variables. For example, here, the number of lectures attended by first-year students has a positive effect on their exam score. The number of lectures attended by first-year students has a positive effect on their exam scores. If you are comparing 2 groups, the hypothesis can state what difference you expect to find between them. For example, first-year students who attended most lectures will have better exam score than those who attended few lectures. So you are now comparing 2 groups. The groups of students that attended more lectures and the group of the students that have less attendance of the class. Right, number 6, write a null hypothesis. A null hypothesis is the default position that there is no any association between the variables. So when stating your hypothesis, you can write the null hypothesis to show no any association between the 2 variables, and you can write alternative hypothesis. This one can be written in H note, that is the null hypothesis, while the alternative hypothesis is HA or H1. Example of null hypothesis can be the number of lectures attended by first-year students has no effects on their final exam scores. Then the alternative hypothesis, the number of lectures attended by first-year students has a positive effect on their final exams. So there are many more examples. Here, you need to choose one hypothesis. Which one you can use? The null hypothesis or alternative hypothesis. And when you develop your research questions, you can set as many hypotheses as possible. For example, 3 hypotheses in one research questions. So finally, you find the answer for that. Thank you, class, for listening to my presentation.